Hello, dear all. English Without Borders welcomes all of you to our series of English Without Borders Thursday webinars. And right now at 6 p.m. Tajikistan time, lots of our followers joining us via Facebook and Zoom. And today we are hosting Dr. Spencer Salas, who will talk about the line between question, responses, and critical reading. Spencer Salas is a professor in the Department of Middle Secondary and K-2, K-12 education at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he leads the PhD in Curriculum and Instruction Urban Literacies, TESL sub-concentration. Among the courses he teaches are globalization and teacher leadership and perspectives on immigration and urban education. An award-winning District of Columbia Public School ESL teacher, he has been a Fulbright Fellow to Romania, Guatemala, and South Africa, an Erasmus Fellow to Germany, a U.S. Department of State Senior English Language Fellow to Peru, and a frequent DOS English Language Specialist from 2003 to present. The ensemble of his scholarship focuses on the New Latino South and has been featured in venues such as Review of Higher Education, the Journal of Basic Writing, and the Urban Review. He is co-editor of Vygotsky into 21st Century Society, U.S. Latinos and Education Policy, Education in the New Latino South, Press in 2017, and the TESOL Encyclopedia of English Language Teaching, first edition of 2018. So during the webinar, we are going to explore how the question-answer relationship might be leveraged as a scaffold for reading comprehension and meaning-making with adolescent English learners. And together with our speaker, we are going to explore how understanding the nuances of the question might enable readers to respond with more confidence as they locate specific information within a text or turn to themselves to answer questions that require thinking beyond the text. So, dear audience, please, if you have any question, you can write in the chat box and let's be active. So, Dr. Spencer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And good morning from UNC Charlotte. And thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to be working with English Without Borders. And for today's session, I'd like to talk about the questions, responses, and critical reading. So this is a presentation I did not too long ago for the U.S. Department of State. And I'm going to now do it again for you all. So let's do from the beginning. Hold on one second. All right, well, here we go. This is where Charlotte is. If you look at the map, you can see North Carolina, it's yellow. And in the western part of North Carolina, almost in South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. And so the University of North Carolina at Charlotte's a large public institution with an enrollment of about 30,000 students. And here at the Cato College of Education, our mission is to prepare K-12 teachers for the state and for the nation. Hold on one second. So in terms of an agenda, today I'd like to reflect on the challenges and rewards of the secondary literature curriculum. And then we'll examine carefully the question-answer relationship or QAR framework. Third, we'll apply QAR to the opening paragraphs of a classic American short story by Stephen Crane, The Open Book. And then we'll think together about why and how we might apply QAR in our classrooms and communities. Well, before we jump in, I want to ask you, at least in my experience, reading literature in its original form, it was the gold standard of language learning when I was learning a language, right? And part of that is because great books are shared world heritage, and we're so proud of our authors. And our authors, our poets, our playwrights, our songwriters are national heroes who transcend borders and time. So to get us started, and we can use the chat here, and Nora maybe can facilitate with the Facebook feed. But my question before we get started is, what's a piece of literature that's inspired you, that you're proud of, that you'd like your students to read and to know? What do you think? What's a great book? If you want, you can jump into the chat, share some of your ideas. Okay, so here we have one from Zuro said, we had a book club with Henry's Freedom Box, a true story. It was fantastic. Great. What other books have you read, or poems that you've read, or authors that you love? And they don't have to be in English, right? Well, in any event, and that's something to think about. Oh, we got some new messages. Let's see. Okay. Shanoma. I don't know that one. And Asalum Asomu Alaikum. I don't know that author. I'd have to look it up and see who it is. Is that a Tajiki author, maybe?
Yes, that is a Tajik author, like Shohnoma. This is the name of the book, which was written by a Persian author, Firdavsi.
Okay.
And
Wow.
Assalamu alaikum means hello yes, to everyone.
Okay.
So this is Tajik greeting.
Okay. Well, look, that's something to think about, but I know that there's pieces of literature that you really have changed your life, right? And that you love, and that you wish your students would love. But the thing is that as teachers, we might love reading, but many teens and young adults struggle studying literature, and there are different reasons why that's so. To begin with, in secondary school, when the kids get older, we shift from teaching reading to teaching literature, right? And for some students, the classics seem too old to be relevant. And other young men and women in our secondary school classrooms might have been labeled or have labeled themselves good or bad readers, right? And those labels stick for a long time. So students who struggle to make sense of texts are likely to struggle throughout their education. We know this, and there's a big research foundation to support this notion. And when students give up on themselves as readers, this is highly problematic for their futures, right? But the thing is, students are often unaware of strategies that can help them understand what a writer's trying to say. So it doesn't have to be that way, and we can all continue to build our strategy awareness as we grow as readers. And I, for one, I'm always looking for new strategies. So I've been collaborating extensively with my colleagues here at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte around adolescents' engagement with literature. So with my theater education colleagues, we've looked at how to bring text to life through voice, sound, movement. With my reading education colleagues, we've looked at making reading-based vocabulary instruction more student-centered. But the truth is, I hadn't never heard of QAR until a couple of years ago. Well, it's actually been around for a long time. And the question-answer relationship approach to reading comprehension, as you can see here, was developed by a researcher named Taffy Raphael back in the 80s. And it's been a very important tool in the US at the primary level, K through 5, that teachers are really well aware of at the elementary school level, but it's widely unknown to the TESOL community of practice, or at least it was to me. And so I was very excited about this strategy because the idea is that once you develop a baseline understanding of a text, then we can use QAR to check for and grow comprehension. So in a nutshell, QAR works from the premise that different question types require readers to respond at different levels of conceptual ability. So some questions that we ask after we've read the story are asking readers to simply read the lines. So the answer to the question that I'm posing, a comprehension question, is in the text. It's right there. It's in the lines. Other questions that we might compose for our students ask readers to read between the lines, focusing both on what the author says and what the author doesn't say and what the author means. And these answers are not stated explicitly in the text. It becomes more of a dialogue between the author and me. And still other questions, a third type, ask readers to read beyond the lines to make evaluate, make connections, think critically about how the text connects to our own experience. So that's what it is in a nutshell. And here's a visual. These are the for Raphael, these are the 4 question types that QAR promotes. In the text, right there. In the text, think and search. So that's literal comprehension. And then applied comprehension, the author and me, and on my own. So how did we get started using QAR? Well, to begin with, you want to select a short text and you want to read it with the students and work on the vocabulary and the syntax and make sure they have a baseline understanding of the text. You've activated background knowledge, you've worked on vocabulary, syntax, and plot. So now that they have a baseline understanding, then we're going to engage students with QAR question types. So what's really important here, and what I want to emphasize, is we don't begin a reading with QAR, we finish the reading with QAR. It's a post-reading strategy. So we're going to select a short text, and the one that I'd like to share with you, and I've sent the link and you can access it through State Gov's website, is by Stephen Crane. He's an American author, 1871 to 1900, and he's best known for The Red Badge of Courage. This is a classic that even my father back in 1940, he read in high school on the island of Guam, believe it or not. It was the only book he ever read in high school. So in a nutshell, if The Red Badge of Courage, it's about the American Civil War, and a young soldier of the Union Army runs away from the battlefield and he's overcome with shame. And we read Stephen Crane even today in secondary school. And like I said, even my dad did. Now we're going to look at The Open Boat, which is the short story based on something that actually happened to Stephen Crane. So between January 2nd and January 4th, 1897, Stephen Crane was lost at sea. There was a shipwreck off Florida's Atlantic coast. So there you can see a map of the United States, and at the very bottom right, there you see Florida sticking out like a pencil. and the Commodore sank near the Florida coast in northwest Florida. So it's the Atlantic Ocean. And in the wintertime, actually, the Atlantic is rough and stormy, right? We have lots of storms, the water's cold, it's treacherous. So to summarize the story, let's pretend that we've read the story several times. I want to just give you a background. In this very short story, it opens with 4 men are drifting at sea in a small boat, right? They're lost at sea. And they can see the shoreline. It's about 20 miles away, but it's too far to swim in the icy water. So they have a big decision to make. What should we do? And after 30 hours or so, they realized no help's going to come. And so they steer the small boat as close to the shore as they can, and then they dive into the rough surf. They try to catch a wave in a desperate attempt to swim to land. So of the 4 men, 3 survive. But Billy washes up, the 4th man, Billy washes up dead on the beach, a quiet and wet shape. Okay, so that's the story. And now let's try and use QAR. So let's start with in the text right there. And here's the question. What color were the waves rocking the boat? So here's the one of the opening paragraphs. And let's see if we can answer this question. It's in the text right there. So I'll read through it slowly. And then let's see what you come up with. None of them knew the color of the sky. Their eyes glanced level and remained upon the waves that swept toward them. These waves were gray except for the tops, which were white, and all the men knew the colors of the sea. The line between sky and water narrowed and widened and fell and rose. So the question is, what color were the waves rocking the small boat? Can you find the answer? What color were the waves? Let's see if you can do it. I'm going to help you here. The waves were gray, except for the tops, which were white. So that's sort of a tricky question, right? Because we would think, okay, what color is the waves? Blue, green. But actually, they're gray, except for the tops, which were white. So the answer is gray and white. And here, it's in the text right there. Okay, that's the first type of QAR question. So to recap, in the text right there questions require literal comprehension. There's a single answer. It's located in the text and it's ready, set, go. So it's asking the reader to scan, to skim and to scan to locate the answer in the text right there. Okay, and again, it's supporting literal comprehension. Now, let's move to the next question type. In the text, think and search. So here the question type is reinforcing literal comprehension. The answer is in the text. But to respond, to get the answer, the reader needs to assemble information from different parts of the text. So it's not all located in the same sentence. So think and search. It might be spread across several pages. Okay, are you ready to try it? Here's the question. Who's in the boat? Who is in the boat? All right, let's read this together slowly and see what you come up with. Who's in the boat? The cook sat at the bottom and looked with both eyes at the 6 inches of boat which separated him from the ocean. He had bared his fat arms as he worked to empty the water from the boat. The oiler, guiding with one of the 2 oars in the boat, sometimes raised himself suddenly to keep away from the water that poured in. It was a thin little oar and it often seemed ready to break. The correspondent, pulling at the other oar, watched the waves and wondered why he was there. The hurt captain lying in front was feeling defeat and despair. So who's in the boat? Okay, take your time and you're going to think and search. So again, the answer is in the text. It's right there, but you have to look for it. I'm going to help you a little bit. See if you got the same answer. So you have the cook, the oiler, whatever the oiler is, right? This is an antiquated word. And, I can guess, okay, oil, maybe it's a mechanic, an engineer, right? The correspondent, that's an old-fashioned word for journalist, right? Stephen Crane was the correspondent in this case, and the hurt captain. So the cook, the oiler, the correspondent, and the hurt captain. And we can see a parallel construction. So each time Crane introduces one of the four men, you have this, the cook, comma, the oiler, comma, the correspondent, comma, the hurt captain, comma. So there it is. We had to look across the text to find the answer. But again, it's in the text. Okay, so do you see the difference in the text right there? It's in a single line or maybe two lines right together. What color were the waves? Gray and white. But here it's who's in the boat? There are four characters. And it requires that we scan, but put together bits and pieces of the text. Who's in the boat? So this requires us to slow down a little. Okay. So now, reading between and beyond the lines. So those first two QAR question types support, like I said, literal comprehension, understanding what the author has explicitly stated in the text. The final two QAR question types support and build skills for reading between the lines and reading beyond the lines. So it's more sophisticated, right? So let's look at this category called the author and me. These types of questions ask readers to think about the text, about themselves, and to use background knowledge to support comprehension. Now, here you have different answers possible. It's not a single answer, right? It's not literal. And these types of questions require students to make a judgment or to formulate an opinion in relation to the text. So it's me and the text. I'm having a discussion with the text. So let's try it. In the open boat, the four men had to weigh the risk of waiting in the boat for help to come versus swimming to shore. So they waited for 30 hours and then they said, okay, we're going to try to swim to shore in this very cold water in January. So do you think, this is the question, author and me, do you think the four men make the right decision to swim to shore? And here it is, why or why not? I'm going to stop for a second and see what you all think. Let me pull up the chat preview. So what do you think? Did they make the right decision? Should they have stayed and waited in the boat? Or should they have tried, risk their luck and try to swim ashore? And I guess the question too is, what would you have done? And these types of questions will be, it's a slower response, right? Because you have to think about it. It's the author and me. And it requires you to make a judgment. Did they make the right choice? So here we're beginning to think more critically. Does anybody want to share their opinion? I personally think that, the one who took the biggest risk was the captain because he was sick. or he was somehow wounded from the shipwreck. So I'm surprised that he was able to make it and Billy the oiler was not. But anyhow, you see, this is a very different type of question, right? It's the author and me. Okay. And finally, hold on one second. Well, to recap, author and me questions require that we enter a mental dialogue with the reading. There isn't a single correct answer, and readers find their answers between the lines. It's in dialogue with the text. So here, these are more sophisticated and require more language. For the students going to produce more language, because they're not only going to say yes, they made the right decision, and here's why, right? Or no, they made the wrong decision, and here's why. And finally, we have on my own questions. So these questions ask readers to move way beyond the lines into their own lives, feelings, dreams, and worlds. And here, it's almost as if it's almost independent from the text, right? So students' responses are going to vary wildly. And here's an example of an on my own question. Have you ever felt lost at sea, abandoned or isolated or helpless? Have you ever felt that way in your life? So here this is really beyond the text, right? It's on my own. And the answers are going to be so different. Does anybody want to share? And let me open up the chat again so I can see. Have you ever felt lost at sea? Okay, I can give an example when I felt this way. When the pandemic started in March 2020, right? We had, I mean, I was here in North Carolina with my son and wife, but there was quite a sense of, there was an uncertainty, right? Especially if you think back to those first few months of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. And we just didn't know what would happen. It seems like it's a long time ago, right? But at least here, from my point of view, that was a time when we were just uncertain, weren't really sure what would happen. And there was a nervousness, right? An anxiety, at least I experienced that. And I think, people process different events in their own way. So it doesn't mean that you necessarily were lost at sea in the ocean, but where you had a similar sensation. Okay. So these questions, the author and me questions, can be quite personal. There's no clear or definitive response. They take us beyond the lines. And so you want to be supportive of the students with the author and me questions. And I wouldn't say you don't want to force them to share their point of view, because sometimes these can be difficult or emotionally difficult, especially that type of question. So to recap, here are the 4 question-answer relationship question types. Write their questions, it's in the lines. So you're going to skim or scan, locate, think and search questions. Again, it's in the lines. You're going to skim, scan, but then you're going to assemble that information from across several pages. Author and me questions are between the lines. You interpret, predict, infer, analyze, critique. And on my own questions are beyond the lines. You connect, relate, justify, analyze, imagine. So these are the 4 question types. And then, I don't know, this is a question I just had for you. Which of the 4 QAR question types do you think your students would be excited to answer or would do the best in answering. In the text right there, in the text think and search, author and me on my own. What do you think? So Fernando said on my own questions. And Manisha said in the text right there, well, I think different students are going to respond differently and have their preferences. And the idea would be you make them aware that there are different types of questions that require us to do different things as readers. And they feel different, right? Some kids will love to do in the text right there because it's like a race, right? Who can find the answer first. The same thing within the text think and search. The author and me on my own, I guess it's a more creative response, but it requires more language. So the idea is we try to use them all. And I can say you don't want to favor one over the other. If we're really going to grow comprehension, we don't want to only do literal comprehension questions in the text or think and search or right there. We want to mix, and we don't only want to do applied questions that are more abstract. We want to mix them up. So in terms of classroom applications, again, you'd start with the familiar text. It's not a new text. You'd share the 4 question types and 4 sample questions. Model your thinking out loud as the reader. Okay, here's the question. I think it's asking me to do this. I think it's this type of QAR question. And once I recognize that question, I type, here's what I'm going to do next. And I think aloud as the reader. And then once they have a good understanding of the 4 question types with the same text, have students create their own questions. And then you can try them out with the class and provide feedback, adjust the questions as necessary. So you know right away if it's in the text, write their question by the response, or if it's in the text, think and search by the response. So you're going to provide feedback and adjust the questions into the appropriate category as necessary. And again, especially with author and me and on my own questions, you celebrate the possibility of multiple answers. And then once they've done it with a familiar text, try QAR again with another text. So to reiterate, as I said in the very beginning, QAR was developed for the primary grades. However, I believe we can use it across grade levels and content areas. And it's one of the many strategies. It's not the only strategy, or it's not the best strategy. It's one of many good strategies we can teach our students to become better readers. So just to wrap up, and then we're going to open it up for questions and discussion. This morning, at least Charlotte time, we used the open vote as an anchor text and explored the question and answer relationship as we looked at the 4 distinct question types of the QAR framework. So understanding question types helps readers respond with more confidence. In other words, the reader learns to look, or when to look, in the lines, between the lines, beyond the lines. And I think the big benefit of QAR is that it can reduce testing anxiety that adolescents sometimes face when they're being tested on some aspect of reading comprehension or the literature curriculum. But even more in schools, at least in the United States, the students may hesitate to ask questions in class, especially when they're reading literature, because they don't think they have the authority or knowledge to respond to questions. And they may think that there's only one answer possible, or that the teacher's answer is the only valid answer. So QAR makes us better question makers, more confident in our ability to respond to questions, and more tolerant of the range of responses that our lived experiences inform. So at a larger level, I think that QAR is a small rehearsal for participation in civil society, where questions and questioning are so important. So when we enter a story such as Stephen Crane's Open Boat, we start asking questions first about words, syntax, narrative. And we can all agree that the waves off the Florida coast per Crane were gray except for the tops, which were white. But what the Crane story means to each of us depends on who we are, who we're still becoming as individuals, as readers, and as communities. And that's reason enough to keep reading, to keep asking questions, and to keep looking for answers. So I want to thank everybody for listening. This article, this presentation will appear in the English Teaching Forum later this year. And I want to also recognize my co-authors, Miriam Moraz, Brian Williams, and Susan Green. All right, so let's stop. I'm gonna stop talking, right? And then let's open, here's some references. If you're interested in learning more about QAR and its origins, and I'll stop talking and then let's open it up for discussion. So Fernando wrote to everybody that most syllabi have the first and second question type. So the literal comprehension questions in the text right there, in the text, think and search. If you're working with a syllabus which takes into consideration critical thinking, then you might find the exercises, well, the question types 3 and 4, between the lines, beyond the lines, the author and me, and on my own. Yes.
Oh, can I say something? Sorry.
Of course.
Sorry interrupting. I already attended your webinar before at American State. It was really interesting, and I believe that teachers need to take into consideration this critical thinking, elaborating critical thinking questions for students, even if their syllabus don't have them. It makes things a lot more interesting and dynamic. I'm sorry if like my face is like this. It's because I have like 2 screens and I'm looking at the big screen here. That's why you can't see my face when I turn around. But anyways, it's an amazing view of what we can do. I mean, it's not because the books that we use just have types 1 and 2 that we don't need to, or we shouldn't adapt or change it or add types 3 and 4. Types 3 and 4 make it a lot more spicier, in my opinion.
Great. So Mahabo, have you tried out some of those question types? Have you tried them out with your students since you visited the webinar? Are you thinking about trying them out with your students?
I try them all the time.
Oh, perfect.
After I saw your webinar, my focus is always on types 3 and 4. I always elaborate some extra questions, and the students love it. That's when they get really engaged. That's when they get really engaged.
Fantastic. And Mary wrote that we always have WH questions in our textbook. So it sounds like those are more for literal comprehension, right? In the text, right there in the text, think and search who, what, where, when, why, how, right? So that's a good point. That I think that teachers generally favor the literal comprehension, but like our colleague just shared, they get excited too about applied comprehension, the author and me, and on my own.
The on my line questions are really interesting because the students really go beyond the text, and they use their creativity a lot, you know, and that's where they start producing. It goes from reading to production, to oral production in a very smooth way.
Nice. Fantastic. And I'm just curious. Okay, so we do have some questions like true or false. So that's going to be literal comprehension. So we want to mix it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ask in the text questions, but we should not only ask in the text questions. We want to apply all four. And what QAR is really interesting to me is to help students develop an awareness of what question type it is, because then they know what they have to do to respond.
Yeah, one thing I realized is that it's easier to work with these question types 3 and 4 with teens and adults, students who have already pre-intermediate to advanced level. With beginners, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yes, because it's going to require more language production. And I'll say something too, even in the non-English coursework, it's helpful to have students in their first language develop an awareness of these question types, right? Because that reading comprehension strategy will transfer from first language to second language or third language, right? So I'm excited that you started to use them. And that's the idea. This is super practical.
Yeah, I believe that we all do this unconsciously, really, What you guys are doing is bringing this, making it conscious for us. But if we realize when we read a book, we do all of these things in our mind, and what we're doing now is we're using these ideas and using it in the classroom, which is really, really cool,
So Manisa said, I use it with my child and it's interesting and engaging, and they'll learn to what to look for while they're reading. Yes. I mean, we do it in elementary level. This is when we use it. Elementary school teachers know this strategy, but it's the secondary teachers that don't necessarily, because we study literature or linguistics, right? If you're teaching in the high school level, probably you study literature or linguistics. Yeah, I was just saying that, a lot of times our formation was in the Department of Literature or Linguistics, so we're not always aware of the great strategies the elementary school teachers are using. But like I said, this has been around for a long time. I really didn't know about it until a couple of years ago. I'm excited to share it with you, and I hope that you'll keep using it with your other texts. I do have a question about the curriculum in Tajikistan, if I can ask. At the secondary level and university level, is it literature based? In other words, do you have a reader and they're working through selections of classic text, or is it more of a functional syllabus or communicative? Or are you still using a literature-based curriculum at the secondary level? I'm just curious to know.
Yes, if anyone from our participants who is teaching at the secondary school, can you share your experience, please? What do you think? Can you unmute yourself and you answer to the question and share your experience?
In other words, do you have a textbook reader that the kids have to use as they work through the later stages of high school that includes selections of literature or stories?
Yeah, may I?
Yes, please, Mihri.
Okay, I'm teaching at secondary school, and we have a books, and they are from the 5th form till 11th form. We have the text. Every lesson has a text to read the story and to get the meaning of the text. And all the exercises, they are depend on the text. If the students are read the text, they can do all the exercises after the text. If they didn't get the meaning of the text, they cannot do for answer the questions or for doing the true or false questions or like this. And we have lots of, especially we have literatures, stories so much, especially in 11th form. And but the students, they like to answer the questions which depend on the text. They like it so much because when they are, it is so easy for them to answer the question because they are copy the text. The answers, they are all that depends on the text, and they like to answer the questions so much. And when I give them homework, they all the students say that, teacher, may we answer for the question, because it is so easy for them to answer the questions from the text. And we have some texts, they are really difficult for their level, but the students, when I explain for them, they get the meaning. When they get the meaning of the text, it would be not so difficult for them.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. So it sounds like you could use QAR with the secondary level reader that you. And again, so it's not only the teacher being aware of the different types of question categories, it's helping students become more aware of them, because then they're going to know what to do to respond. Anybody else want to share an idea?
Yes,
Hello,
Fernando,
Dr.
please.
Spencer.
Yeah, Manisha. Yeah. Okay, we have Fernando here. He raised his hand to answer to the question and to say something. Please, Fernando.
Yeah, I live in Brazil, and here in Brazil, we do use literary texts in high schools, but they use literary texts from local authors, not in the English classes. Okay, they do this in the Portuguese classes. In the English classes, there's very little use of any kind of literal text in high schools. Now, in independent schools, we do have we have some like reading book projects. Like in the States, we try to do something similar, but not in high schools, not with English, only with their native language.
Well, that's really interesting. And you know, what I'd like to say too is that you can use QAR with different types of text, with nonfiction text, informational text, that sort of thing too. So it's not specific to literature or to fiction. You can use it with, you know, even a newspaper article.
Yeah, anything for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think we can wrap up now, right? And I just want to say again, it's been really exciting to meet with you today. I'm so happy to see all of the great things that you're doing with English Without Borders. And I hope that one day y'all come to UNC Charlotte, right, to visit us. And in the meantime, wish you a happy spring. And I guess you're getting ready for exams coming up, right? But pretty soon it'll be summer and the summer vacation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Spencer Salas. That was really nice to have you in our today's webinar. Thank you for all who joined us. And thank you, Dr. Salas, for nice techniques on reading. So reading is not easy skills though, but still we have great techniques that you have shared with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you indeed. It was very nice, and it's so good that I saw it for the second time. That's
All
how
right.
good. Yeah, that was really
All
cool.
right.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank
Okay,
you
goodbye.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spencer.